Look at what you're wearing right now. Whatever it is, a shirt, a hoodie, pajamas, something you've been in for 3 days because nobody's coming over, you put it on without thinking. You've been doing it your entire life. Every human you've ever met has done it. Every human in every photograph, every painting, every piece of footage ever recorded has done it. Now ask yourself when that started. Not when fashion started, not when culture started, when the first human looked at a dead animal and thought, I should wear that. Because that moment, whenever it happened, wasn't about modesty. It wasn't about fashion. It wasn't even about warmth, at least not at first. It was about survival. And the story of how it happened is stranger and darker than most people expect. Here's what makes clothing unusual as a human behavior. We are the only species that does it. No other animal covers itself deliberately. Some animals use objects as tools. Some build shelters, but no other creature looks at the world around it and decides to attach pieces of it to its own body as a permanent daily habit, which means clothing isn't instinct. It's something else, something that had to be invented, practiced, and passed down. And whatever drove that invention was powerful enough to embed itself so deeply into human behavior that today it feels as natural as breathing. So what was it? The first thing scientists reached for was the obvious answer: cold. Humans started wearing clothes because they got cold. And this is probably true. But it's not the whole story, and the parts it leaves out are more interesting than the parts it includes. Because here's the problem with the cold explanation. Modern humans evolved in Africa under intense equatorial sun in environments that were warm. The earliest Homo sapiens 300,000 years ago didn't need clothes to survive their native climate. They were, like every other primate, naked, and they were fine. So cold can't explain the beginning of clothing. It can explain why clothing became essential once humans moved into colder environments. But something else had to come first. Enter the Parasite Theory. And it is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. In 2003, a researcher named Mark Stoneking published a study that approached the clothing question from an angle nobody had thought to use before. He wasn't studying bones or cave paintings, he was studying lice. Specifically, the evolutionary split between head lice and body lice. Here's why this matters. Head lice live in hair. Body lice live in clothing. They are closely related, in fact. Body lice evolved from head lice at some point in history, and the moment they diverged is the moment clothing was invented. Because without clothing, body lice have nowhere to live. By analyzing the genetic divergence between the two species, Stoneking's team estimated that clothing first appeared somewhere between 70,000 and 170,000 years ago. That range is enormous, nearly 100,000 years of uncertainty. But even the conservative end of that estimate tells us something striking. Humans were wearing clothes before they left Africa in large numbers, before they encountered the ice, before they needed to survive winters that killed. Which means clothing wasn't invented as a response to cold. It was invented for something else. And then, when humans moved into colder environments, it turned out to be exactly what they needed to survive. Timing, as it often is in human history, was everything. But this still doesn't answer the original question. If not cold, then why? What pushed the first human to pick up an animal skin and put it on? The most compelling answer has nothing to do with temperature at all. It has to do with sun. When humans left the forest canopy and moved into open savanna environments, they lost something critical: shade. Their bodies adapted in remarkable ways. They lost most of their body hair, developed the ability to sweat continuously, and became efficient, upright runners capable of chasing prey across long distances in full heat. But losing body hair created a new problem. Exposed skin under intense African sun accumulates damage. UV radiation breaks down folate, a B vitamin essential to fetal development. It damages DNA over decades, increasing cancer risk. And in a world without medical intervention, these weren't minor inconveniences. They were survival threats. The earliest clothing animal skins draped over the shoulders, across the chest, may have begun as sun protection, not warmth. Shade carried on the body. There's archaeological evidence that points in this direction. The first tools identified as likely clothing-related scrapers used to process animal hides appear in the African archaeological record long before humans needed them for warmth. Someone was working leather in warm climates, for reasons that had nothing to do with winter. Now layer the cold explanation back on top. When humans began migrating north into Europe, into Asia, into environments where temperatures dropped below zero and stayed there for months, clothing stopped being useful and became essential. Without insulation, the human body loses heat faster than it can generate it. Fingers stop working, cognitive function drops, unconsciousness follows, and then death. The humans who survived those migrations were the ones who had figured out not just how to drape a skin over their shoulders, but how to make it stay, how to shape it, how to seal the gaps where cold air entered. And this is where the story gets genuinely impressive, because making effective cold weather clothing is not simple. An animal skin thrown over the body still lets cold in at every edge. To make real insulation, you need to tailor to cut skins into specific shapes and join them together to cover the body completely. You need to create seams. And to create seams, you need a needle. The oldest known sewing needles made from bone date to approximately 50,000 years ago, found at sites in Siberia. These weren't crude tools. They were sophisticated, precisely made instruments with a hole drilled through one end for thread. The thread itself was likely sinew animal tendon pulled into thin, flexible strands. Think about what this required. Someone had to look at a dead animal and extract its tendons. Someone had to understand that those tendons could be twisted and stretched into something flexible and strong. Someone had to drill a precise hole through a small piece of bone without breaking it, and someone had to understand that passing the thread through that hole and pulling two pieces of skin together would create a join that held. This is not instinct, this is engineering. And the people who figured it out, who understood not just that animal skins could cover the body, but how to construct garments that fit, sealed against cold, and lasted through seasons of hard use, those people survived environments that killed everyone else. There's a deeper dimension to this story that most people never consider. Clothing doesn't just protect the body, it changes what the body can do. A human without clothing is constrained by their environment. They can only go where the temperature allows. They can only hunt what their unprotected skin can endure. They can only survive where food is abundant enough to compensate for the calories lost maintaining body heat. A human with effective clothing is something different. They can follow prey into the coldest regions on Earth. They can survive winters that last half the year. They can store fat, conserve energy, and outlast the animals they're hunting. Clothing is not just protection, it's territory expansion. It's the difference between being limited by the world and being able to move through it on your own terms. This is why some researchers argue that the invention of tailored clothing was one of the most significant moments in human prehistory, more consequential in some ways than stone tools, which change what you can do with your hands because clothing changes where you can go with your whole body. It's also why the disappearance of the Neanderthals is impossible to fully understand without thinking about clothing. Neanderthals wore skins. They processed hides using scrapers. They almost certainly wrapped themselves against the cold they had lived in for hundreds of thousands of years. But the evidence suggests they may not have tailored, may not have made fitted, seamed garments the way modern humans did. If that difference is real, it matters enormously, because a loosely wrapped skin and a properly constructed garment are not the same thing in a serious winter. The gap at the wrist, the cold air at the neck, the warmth lost over hours as the skin shifts and allows heat to escape, over a winter, over many winters. The accumulated cost is lethal. Some researchers believe this difference, the ability to tailor versus the ability to merely cover, was part of what allowed modern humans to survive environments in which Neanderthal populations were already struggling. Not because modern humans were stronger or smarter in any obvious way, but because their clothes fit better. That's the kind of detail that changes history. So here is what we know. Clothing probably began in Africa, in warmth, for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. It began as protection from sun, from insects, from the dangers of exposed skin in an open environment. And then, when humans moved into the cold, it transformed into something without which survival was impossible. It was refined from draped skin to fitted garment over tens of thousands of years through the development of tools, needles, scrapers, awls that are among the most precisely made objects in the ancient world. And it changed everything, not just what humans wore, where they could go, what they could survive, which environments they could enter, and which populations could outlast the cold long enough to become our ancestors. You put on your clothes this morning without thinking about any of this. But the reason you're here to do it, the reason any of us are here, is partly because someone, tens of thousands of years ago, figured out how to sew.